The ink on my husband's death certificate was barely dry when my mother-in-law slid an envelope across the kitchen table and said, "There's enough in there to take care of it." I stared at her. Outside, the November wind was throwing sleet against the windows of the house Daniel and I had spent 3 years making into a home. Inside, I could still smell the flowers from the funeral white lilies that had filled the living room 2 days ago, while I stood in a black dress with my hand pressed against my 5-month belly, trying to hold myself together. "Take care of what?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. My mother-in-law Ruth folded her hands on the table the way she always did when she'd already decided something. She was 61 years old, a retired bank manager from Tucson, who wore blazers to casual dinners and kept her gray hair cut like a helmet. Daniel used to say she wasn't cold, just efficient. I used to believe him. "The pregnancy, Claire," she said. "You're 29 years old. You have no income right now. Daniel is gone. A baby alone will destroy whatever future you have left." I felt the room tilt slightly. Daniel and I wanted this baby. Daniel is not here anymore. Those 4 words hit me somewhere below my ribs. I pushed the envelope back across the table. "I'm keeping my child." She didn't raise her voice. She never raised her voice. That was somehow worse. She just looked at me with that expression, the one that said she was about to reorganize something, and said, "Then I need you out of this house by Friday." "This is my home." "This house," Ruth said, opening a manila folder I hadn't noticed sitting beside her coffee mug, was purchased in 2019 with a private loan of $240,000 that Daniel took from me. We had a written agreement. He was paying me back monthly. The loan is collateralized against the property. She slid a document across the table. Since Daniel passed without a will, the estate goes to probate. As the primary creditor, I have legal standing to occupy and manage the property during proceedings. I looked at the paper. I looked at her face. I thought about every Sunday dinner I'd sat through in this kitchen, every Christmas, every time she'd called Daniel on his cell phone and talked for 45 minutes while I pretended not to notice. I thought about how I had never once seen this document before in my life. "You planned this," I said quietly. "I'm protecting my son's estate," she said. "Friday, Claire. I'll arrange for your things to be boxed." I was 5 months pregnant, a part-time nursing instructor whose hospital contract had ended in September when my position got cut, and I was being handed a moving deadline like an overdue library book. I did not cry in front of her. I want you to know that. I went upstairs to the bedroom I had shared with Daniel for 4 years, sat on the edge of our bed, put both hands on my stomach, and breathed. Just breathed, in and out. Me and whoever was in there. Then I picked up my phone and called my coworker, Diane. Diane was 53, had survived a divorce, 2 rounds of breast cancer, and a kitchen renovation, which she always said was the hardest of the 3. She answered on the second ring. "She's kicking you out," I said. A pause. "When?" "Friday." "Okay. You're coming to stay with me. And tomorrow we're going to see Marcus Webb." Marcus Webb was a family law attorney whose card Diane had given me approximately 2 years ago at a hospital Christmas party, saying, "I hope you never need this, but keep it." Marcus was 44, a former public defender who now ran a 2-person practice out of an office above a dry cleaning shop on Garfield Street. He had kind eyes and a way of listening that made you feel like the most important person in the room. I sat across from him the next morning with the loan document in my hand and told him everything. He read through the papers slowly, asked me 3 questions, then set them down. "The agreement is real," he said. Daniel signed it. "But here's what Ruth isn't telling you. A private collateralization agreement does not give her the right to occupy the property during probate without a court order. What she handed you is a scare tactic dressed up in legal language. You have standing as the surviving spouse. You have more than standing in this state. A surviving spouse's right to the primary residence is protected even during estate proceedings, especially when there's a minor or an unborn child involved." I stared at him. "So she lied. She told you a partial truth, structured to make you leave voluntarily. There's a difference legally anyway. Less so morally." He leaned forward. "Claire, do not leave that house." I went home. I did not pack a single box. When Ruth came downstairs Friday morning and found me sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and my laptop open, she stopped in the doorway. "You need to leave," she said. "I spoke with an attorney," I said. "I'm the surviving spouse and primary resident. My unborn child has protected status under state probate law. If you want me removed from this house, you'll need a court order. My attorney's contact information is on the table if you'd like to reach out to your own counsel." The silence lasted a long time. She picked up the card. She looked at me. For a moment I saw something move across her face, not regret, not quite, but something adjacent to it. Then she walked back upstairs. She didn't speak to me for 11 days. During those 11 days, I learned things. It started with Daniel's laptop. He'd left it in his home office, and I'd avoided going in there because the smell of the room, coffee, and cedar from the candle he always kept on his desk made my chest cave in. But I needed his insurance documents, and on the third day I finally went in. The laptop was password protected. I tried his birthday. Wrong. I tried our anniversary. Wrong. I tried the name of the dog we'd had before she died, Rosie, and it opened. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that. I was looking for a folder marked insurance, and instead I found one marked Ruth Do Not Delete. I sat down slowly. Inside were 4 years of bank statements. Daniel had been meticulous, every transfer documented, every date noted in a separate spreadsheet. The loan payments to Ruth I already knew about, but what I didn't know was the column beside them, the one Daniel had labeled discrepancy. Starting in January 2 years ago, the numbers didn't match. Ruth had been receiving Daniel's monthly payments $1,200, every first of the month, direct transfer, all documented. But Daniel's records showed that from his account the money left on the first. Ruth's records, which he had apparently photographed during a visit to her home office, showed it arriving on the 7th or 8th, sometimes later, with different transaction IDs. He'd written a note in the spreadsheet in red text. "Someone is intercepting. Talk to Marcus?" Marcus. The name gave me a jolt. Daniel had known Marcus Webb. I called Marcus that afternoon. "He came to see me," Marcus said, and his voice had shifted into something quieter. "About 8 months ago. He'd found the same discrepancies. He thought someone might have gained access to one of his accounts and was delaying the transfers, skimming the float. He wasn't sure if it was a bank error or something deliberate. Did you figure out what it was?" We were still looking into it when he passed. I thought about the timeline. Daniel died on October 14th, a Tuesday, a highway accident in the rain outside of Denver, a work trip, a rental car, a guardrail. The police report said ice. I had never questioned it. I had been too deep in grief to question anything. "Marcus," I said, "was the accident investigated?" A pause that lasted 1 second too long. "It was ruled accidental." "That's not what I asked." Another pause. "Come back in." I went back in. What Marcus told me over the next 2 hours rearranged something fundamental in the way I understood my own life. Daniel had discovered that money from his account wasn't being intercepted randomly. It was being redirected small amounts, dozens of transactions, skimmed off the top of various transfers over 2 years, to a holding account in a name Marcus's investigator hadn't been able to trace yet. The total skimmed was somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000. The only people with access to Daniel's primary account were Daniel, and one authorized secondary user he'd added 3 years ago at her request, so she could help manage the loan repayments. Ruth. I had to put my hand flat on Marcus's desk to steady myself. "He didn't tell me," I said. "Why didn't he tell me?" "He said he wanted to be certain before he said anything to you. He didn't want to be wrong about his own mother." I thought about Daniel, patient, careful Daniel, who double-checked everything and hated making accusations. Who would have spent months confirming and reconfirming before he brought something like this to me? Who had driven to Denver for a work trip and never come home? "The accident," I said again. The route he drove that night had functional road sensors. There was no ice warning logged in the DOT system for that stretch of highway in the 2-hour window before his accident. Marcus laid a printed page in front of me. I requested this 6 weeks ago. I wasn't sure what to do with it. I looked at the page. I thought about Ruth sliding a document across the kitchen table. I thought about the word efficient. I thought about my baby, who turned over at that exact moment, as if agreeing with whatever I was about to decide. "We're going to the police," I said. "I want you to understand," Marcus said carefully, "that this doesn't prove anything yet. The financial discrepancies are documentable. The accident we would need to open a formal inquiry, which means involving the Denver PD and possibly the state. It could take a long time. It could go nowhere. And it would mean living in that house with her while it does." "I know. Claire." "I know," I said again. "Let's go anyway." We filed with the Denver Police Department's Accident Reinvestigation Unit on a Thursday. Marcus submitted the financial documentation to our local district attorney's office the same afternoon. I came home to a house where Ruth was making soup in my kitchen like she belonged there, and I sat down at the table across from her, and for the first time since Daniel died, I looked at her the way she had always looked at me, levelly, without flinching. "I found his files," I said. She didn't turn from the stove. "I found the spreadsheet, Ruth. The one he labeled with your name." She stirred the soup. The discrepancies, the redirected transfers. He'd been documenting it for 2 years. She set the spoon down on the counter. Her back was still to me. "He was going to confront you," I said. "That's why he went to Marcus. He was building a case because he wanted to be fair to you. That was Daniel. Even when someone was stealing from him, he wanted to be fair." My voice broke slightly on that. I let it. And then he got in a car in Denver and drove on a highway with no ice warnings and went through a guardrail. Ruth turned around. Her face was the same as always, composed, arranged, but her hands were gripping the counter. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she said. "Maybe not," I said, "but the Denver PD might." The next 3 months were the hardest of my life, and also, strangely, the most clarifying. Ruth hired an attorney. The attorney sent us a letter claiming the financial records were misinterpreted. Marcus's response was 40 pages long. I went about the business of being pregnant, doctor appointments, prenatal vitamins, a crib. I assembled myself one Saturday afternoon while Diane sat on the nursery floor handing me bolts and telling me about her kitchen renovation in enough detail to fill a mini-series. My daughter was born on February 9th. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, dark hair like Daniel's, a scream that filled the delivery room like an announcement. I named her Rose. I thought Daniel would have wanted that. Ruth was not at the hospital. She was, at that point, the subject of a formal financial fraud investigation. The DA's office had found the holding account. It was in the name of a woman I didn't recognize, a name that turned out to belong to a college friend of Ruth's who had passed away a decade earlier. The account opened 2 years ago with forged identification. The transfers added up to $53,000 over 26 months. As for Denver, the investigation was slower and ultimately, as Marcus had warned me, inconclusive. The re-examination found anomalies in the accident reconstruction that warranted further review, but warranted further review is not the same as an answer. I have learned to live in that uncertainty. It is not easy. There are nights I lay Rose down in her crib and stand there in the dark and try to understand a world where efficiency and love can live inside the same person and produce something that monstrous. I don't always manage it. What I do know is this: Daniel was trying to protect me. All those months of spreadsheets and read text notes and quiet meetings with Marcus, he was building something he thought would keep me safe. He just didn't get to finish it, so I finished it for him. The house is mine. Marcus was right. The probate court recognized my spousal rights and Rose's status without much contest once Ruth's legal credibility was destroyed by the fraud case. Ruth's attorney withdrew once the indictment came through. The loan debt is in dispute and will likely be settled as part of the criminal proceedings. In the meantime, I am living in my home, in the town Daniel chose, in the house where I can still sometimes catch the cedar smell from his office if I open the door on a warm afternoon. I went back to nursing full-time in January, 2 weeks before Rose arrived, on a contract at the regional hospital 20 minutes away. My manager was a woman who had apparently heard something of my situation through the professional grapevine nurses talk, and who called Guafis on my first day, not to ask about it but to say simply, "We're glad to have you, and we have good maternity leave." I cried in my car afterward, not from sadness, just from the plain, unexpected weight of being seen. Diane comes over on Sunday evenings. She brings food and sits on the floor with Rose and talks to her in the voice adults use for babies, which is silly and perfect. Marcus checks in by text every few weeks with case updates, short professional messages that sometimes end with a photo of his dog, a beagle named Frank, who appears to live an extremely satisfying life. I still talk to Daniel. Not out loud, mostly just in the way you carry a person inside you once they're gone, the running conversation that doesn't stop, because they're not there to answer. I tell him about Rose. I tell him what she weighs and what sounds she makes and the specific way she holds my finger when she's falling asleep, her whole hand wrapped around my index finger like she's claiming something. I think he would be undone by her in the best possible way. Some days grief is a room I can walk through. Some days it's the whole house. But I am still in the house, that's the thing. I didn't leave. There was a moment, in those first weeks after the funeral, when I came very close to doing exactly what Ruth had calculated I would do, taking the envelope, walking out, dismantling my life in an orderly fashion because someone efficient told me to. I was scared and alone, and my husband was gone, and the ground felt like it had turned to water under my feet. But I thought about Daniel making his spreadsheet. Careful, patient, thorough Daniel, documenting every discrepancy, refusing to be wrong, doing the work even when it was hard. I thought about what he had been building, and I decided that the least I could do was finish it. Rose turned over this morning for the first time, rolled from her back to her stomach, and looked up with an expression of complete astonishment, like she couldn't believe what her own body had just done. I laughed out loud in the empty room. It echoed. It was the best sound I've heard since the day she was born, screaming, announcing herself to a world that had better be ready. We're still here, both of us.